So just I think social economic discrimination, what it means to me is, if you think from the inner city communities, in that we're quite distinct, we've a generational history here. The signifiers of discrimination we face is our accent, and would be first and foremost. The housing complex, so we all live in very distinct flat complexes where we all live together, and that we're kind of like segregated from the other communities, but we live as part of a community, so we're easily identifiable with the accent, the flats that we come from, and the addresses that we have, that shared history of cultural understanding. So when you go into real life situations, what does that mean? So the accent discrimination, you have, the dogs on the street know if you're going up to a pub, you're being refused entry once they hear the accent. You're ringing up for insurance quotes, you're ringing up to book for christenings, the accent, and people try to change their accent, but like you're changing a sense of your identity. Same even if you're booking for insurance online, you put your address, you're being disproportionately charged a higher premium on average. Up until 2016 as well, some universities, if you were applying to university, you had to be guard affected if you were basically classed as a disadvantaged student. So they're all the things that can be like social class discrimination. Your financial background as well, can be aspects. Your educational background, like if you are homeless as well. So it can mean other things for other people as well, like, so if you're unemployed, say if we just strictly take someone that's unemployed, well, if they want to rent a car, they could be barred because the policies is like that we don't rent to people that's unemployed. So you have that individual aspect, but then you have the cultural bit, that there is people in Ireland that regionally, that might have a regional accent, have that shared history, and you're discriminated, you're othered. So while now Dublin is getting more and more profitable, they see the Indigenous community as kind of like in the way of quote unquote progress, and we're easily identifiable. The majorities live in flat complexes like this, we've quite distinct accents, we stick together, we've a big community, we've a shared history, to where other people, you might have someone that comes here and they lose their job for a while and they're unemployed for maybe 2-3 months. They might face discrimination about getting a quote for insurance or car insurance or health insurance in that given particular time. But even like myself, while I have escaped economically my social class, I'm socially still reminded of it in day-to-day interactions all the time, in terms of trying to go to a pub, booking things, get invited to a party from a different social class, and people treating you in kind of in a suspicious way, or asking you kind of like weird kind of questions and all, like. So that's, in my experience, what the social economic discrimination means, kind of in a nutshell. It's something I could talk about all day, but that's like, if I was to talk about like what it is like in the inner city of Dublin, that's the kind of things you'd get in and out. Or even kids trying to get into schools around here, like there's some private schools, like, but they have like enrollment policies, and you're basically, the way they have the policies about family members and all, like, you're just kind of, you can't get. And then financially, you're trying to join gyms or get access to like the universities around here to use their access and all. You're basically just, the community's priced out. So instead of just directly saying we're not letting your kind in here, they'll basically just say, oh, there's a such and such way fee that you need, a joining fee. But then if someone then just rocks in and they think they're of good stock, or like if they're, like, you have some universities around here that have gym memberships, and up until 2 years ago when we fought to change it, they would give discounts, corporate discounts, so people that were earning essentially the biggest income working for the big multinational companies, they got the cheapest rate. But if you were unemployed, you basically were getting the highest. Like, just if, say, you are someone a bright kid around here that defies the odds and goes on and gets a university and wants to get into one of the prestigious graduate programs that many of the multinational companies have, Well, their graduate programs basically have a filtering system. Now, I don't know if they're sitting around in a room deliberately doing this, but subconsciously there's a huge subconscious bias that's cutting off anyone from these areas getting even their foot in the door in these companies. So they're asking, like, what's your junior cert results? You have to have it immaculate junior cert results. What's your leaving cert results? Do you know someone in the company? What do you have a 2.1? Now, someone from our area where you don't have any of those resources to even get into university and even to get a pass rate, you need to factor all that in about like their willingness to succeed and what skills they would bring to the table. But no, so they get cut off. They're not going to know anyone in the company. So before they even get past whatever way the computer's shaving off the points, they're not even getting into it. And then some of the companies as well will say, do you have a criminal record? And there's some people around here, like, they could be 18, 19, and you know, they got caught with a bit of weed or caught with this. They don't have the financial resources to get good legal representation, so disproportionately they end up more with a criminal record than someone else. Yeah. So they're the kind of things on the subconscious level, but then you have the blatant stuff, like, you know, people look at the addresses, if you go for a job as well, the discrimination, if you get into a job, the subtle remarks or the blatant remarks about tone down the accent, can you speak a bit more professional, can you dress more appropriately, like, do you know, what does all that mean? So they're all kind of the little things or big things that people affect. Like, you talk to anyone in a pub, if they don't know what actually all this legislation means, they'll tell you basically what I've told you. They'll tell you the same thing in different shapes and sizes and ways. Like, what happened in what's happening now in the Liberties, it seems to be kind of like a shock to people, like that's happening now, and it's like people are like, oh, gentrification is coming to the city centre of Dublin. That happened 20 years ago in the Docklands, in that all the factories and then all the multinational companies, they built all the big offices and you have all the luxury gated apartments. And if you're like just across the road there, like if you're over even in Sheriff Street, you have a wall that's separating the community from the gated apartments. You have all the cages and the gates around all the apartment blocks around here. Now that wasn't just done by fluke, there was a design to that. And like there's all these kind of things around, like, oh well, if there is concerns around antisocial behaviour, but like you need to think, if you're designing a city, what are we saying about ourselves, the psyche of ourselves? It's like we're building gates around ourselves to box ourselves in. Now the residents might not have any say in that, but it's like, what's the thing behind that design? Like gated communities, why are they gated? Who's the people then that's living that's not gated? Like our flats, their flats are open, you can publicly walk into them. Are they gating themselves? Are they segregating themselves around us? Do you know? So that's the thing around here, like, and some of those gated apartments, they're supposed to have a 10% social housing, and what's just happened in the UK, some of them now have the poor doors, as in like you have a certain section that only the people who are basically on the HAP or at the social housing, they have a direct access in, and they can't use the same facilities as the people that are. So that's all that class segregation still going on now. If that was done on the grounds of race, there would be uproar and people would have the rights to actually challenge that. But because it's on social, it's all fake, and you're hoping out good faith or that the newspaper might report on it, but there's no mechanisms to challenge that at the moment. To where if it was done on, say, the grounds of disability or the grounds of race, there's a lot more. Like, you could ring IREC up, or you could ring like FLAC, and they may be able to take litigation depending on the circumstances, if it's a good case to have that action stopped. But on social class, you're just hoping people's common sense will come to the surface, and sometimes it doesn't. And if you don't have the social capital to get that all the time, it's quite exhausting. You have to keep like shouting about a hope and that all that. But if it doesn't get the coverage, it's just another, I know, look, that's the way it is. And that's feeding in. There's all around in areas, there's a huge growing resentment, and it's not just towards people that are against social inclusion or against social, it's people that you would think would be fighting the corner about social justice. They seem to kind of have it's almost like it's a deserving type of social inequality, or it's not a priority for many, just in our experience and with many NGOs and stuff, that you would never see them down pushing this campaign, or like if you've seen the support that people got behind the Repeal the 8 movement. We need to ask ourselves, I'm not even doing this in a way of criticising, like it's just things relate to certain people, just like, why is there not that movement behind class discrimination? Why is there not that movement behind traveller discrimination? So is there a hierarchy of equality in Ireland? I would argue from my experience that there is. So equality is supposed to be everything is this kind of the same, but there is certain issues, and that's not necessarily an issue because it's a priority. Like in my experience, I find the issues of LGBT, gender are always at the forefront. But like there is other types of inequalities going on, and like social class discrimination, and it doesn't even have a rights-based approach. There's no commitments from the government, there's no obligations on employers or services. And the way things are like segregated, why do we have that segregation? Why are they building those gated? So that's all happened around the Docklands over the last 20 years. So if you were even to look at a map of deprivation in the Docklands, it's basically like you look at a square, the square, like this flat complex we're in would be extreme red, extreme disadvantage, but then literally across the road, just there you have gated apartments, and that will either be affluent or extremely affluent. And those people aren't from this community. It's kind of like a transient population that comes in and out and works in the docks in the multinational companies, and it's like 2 years, 3 years, and they leave, and then new people come. So there's no interaction. That's gated as well. We can't even walk into them. So all the community activities that go around here, we just pass them on the street. I don't know anyone from any of those communities. I've never been invited to. They don't come when we have all the community stuff around here. They don't come to the stuff either. The only time we'll ever hear the interaction with them is like when they want further policing, or they want, so this whole sense of like, so I don't know, is those gates making them feel more unsafe? Do you know, if you build a gate and a wall, sometimes it's like, does that almost create a them and us attitude, you know? Yeah, so just in a nutshell for like people that wouldn't know about this, so in 1998 you had the equality legislation was put in, the Employment Equality Act, and it protected on 9 grounds, and then in 2000 you had then the equal status, so that was essentially protecting against discrimination on the 9 grounds from accessing goods and services. So that's like going to a pub or going into a restaurant or going into Pennies or whatever, and if you're discriminated. But one ground that was left out, even though there was recommendations that it should be put in, was the social economic ground. So in a nutshell, that's basically discrimination on someone's class, their accent, the social background that they have, the area that they might come from. So that was left out, but then there was a commitment to do a review, and in 2004 they did do a review, and the review and the reports recommended that the social economic ground should go in to the equality legislation. It never materialised. The can got kicked down the road. There was calls every few years. There were some bills put in, but they were defeated. But it keep coming to the surface. But as the equality grounds that were in since 1998, what happened? When I was a kid in the 90s, social class and social justice issues and people from the inner city were at the forefront of the social justice movement. But because of the equality grounds, while it was a positive, there were some negatives as well as this and that. All those grounds got rights-based approaches, but what happened then, they kind of siloed. So you would have like the disability rights-based groups, you'd have LGBT or gender or racism, because they had a rights-based approach to attack those issues, and it wasn't happening out of any bad intentions, but they were focusing on improving those rights for all those groups, that they were focused on making small wins again, or big wins sometimes as well. And using those rights based that you can't discriminate, and it was setting that culture of compliance. But then areas like Sheriff Street and Pearse Street, the discrimination we were facing was kind of just getting lost within that. And even amongst all those kind of groups that was protected, they knew this was happening, and we'd have a conversation with them, be like, class needs to be put in, they'd be like, we agree with you. But that wasn't their priority. Like, if you have your job to do and advance just the issues of disability or advance the issues of racism, but as the years went on, that kept festering and festering. So then you would see, like in our area, you go to college and they'd have a commitment policy on the 9 grounds. If you go to your employer, they'd have a commitment on the 9 grounds, and all the talk was all around that. But in these areas, people started getting really resentful of that. It was like, we've been forgotten about, and sometimes we'd get smirked at or get demonised, as in like, then we were being seen as, the left was almost looking at us as we're the enemy. So in 2016 there was kind of a resurgence to try get this up and moving again by a good kind of a group of like what's kind of called the Alliance, like ATD, a few other organisations as well, and IREC as well then got on board. So there has been a resurgence, and in the community as well there was an ATD campaign, and simplistic in its approach, and that the jigsaw piece. So if you ask people around the inner city, they would be familiar now. People would often say like, we're left out of all this, but wouldn't know the ins and outs. But the language around the inner city now is, we're not included. We can't take a discrimination case to the WRC. We can't get, the policies around equality, the multinational companies' commitment to equality. They don't include social class, so we're left out. Even though we're one of the most marginalised communities in the state, we're completely left out of that framework, which is, now you have to ask yourself, imagine gender or race was left out of the equality grounds. Do you think I would personally think, and I think it is fair enough to say, that there would be a lot more NGOs out front and centre and completely pushing this to where my big disappointment is like how silent they can be on this, or how blasé, when it is a huge substantial issue, and it's an issue you see every day, and it's almost affecting every walk of life. If you walk around, if you go from the Guinnesses, walk down to Pearse Street, go over to Sherrill Street, go over to Sean McNairn Street, to Ballybock, you'll see social inequality, social discrimination. If you go online and look at the comments, what people are talking about, it's just constant classism. But there isn't seem to be a movement about cutting down on that, to where if there's comments about other groups, people rightfully so are like, we need to crack down on this, I need to. So that's the way kind of I've noticed it. Yeah, well, I think similar to the traveller ground, I don't think it'd be a panacea that it will just solve things overnight, but it will give people in these communities a rights-based approach to attack and address the issues that's happening. So if it's to do with employment, you could have community centres around here. When they meet with employers, they're going to the table with a rights-based approach to be like, look, there is obligations under the Equality Acts. When employers are doing a policy on grievance policies or recruitment policies, they have to include a commitment to social economic. So that would be a recruitment policy, but a retention of staff. It wouldn't just be on the 9 grounds. So that's that culture of compliance. If the government are taking people in jobs in civil service, you have that obligation as well. If the government has a policy framework on different types of equality grounds about what they're doing, strategies on travellers, strategies on gender, strategy on LGBT, with the equality, the social economic ground is in, that there would be a policy on that, and all the rights-based approaches like ATD would be invited to stakeholder meetings about advancing that. And then even just for the normal Joe Soap, if he or she gets discriminated in work or goes into a pub, they then are aware then that they can challenge that, and that then empowers people. To where at the moment people are just completely defeatist and acceptive now that like you walk into a place, there's nothing you can do. They know that they can do it on social class. I think that's where you're going to see the big effect, and then you'll have big, strong, obvious cases that get took to the WRC. You'll have cases in the paper. Now when you have discrimination on the grounds of, say, gender or LGBT or racism, they sometimes get into the media or on social media, people are talking about them. because people now are aware of that language and they know they can challenge people on it. So where with social class, it's always just kind of this, I don't know, many times you're just looking online and you just see some of the most classist type of things. Sometimes it's encouraging hatred against a certain group of people. If you report that to like Instagram or report it doesn't fall into their 9 grounds equality policy, so they literally just say it doesn't breach our hate speech policy. Like if you say it to Instagram, you get the generic responses back. Not to say, I'm not saying that the people that have the ground in are getting any better out of them, but at least then you have that. So while overall it's not going to solve things overnight, but at least then it's going to empower community groups, your normal Joe Soap, and then the framework, as in the government framework or code of practices that employers need to have, that service needs to have about their access, their customer service charter or their employment recruitment policy or retention policies, and upward mobility policies as well will have to take. So they're all the little changes to where at the moment people in this circle kind of fighting about against social economic discrimination. We're kind of going around in a basically with the poor box out, hoping always out of good faith, and you get little small wins here and there, but then after 6 months people could kind of forget about that because they're not obligated. It's like, even, I don't know if you remember, like when the data protection regulations came in, everyone came aware of them, and now it's just like, oh yeah, you can't do that because it's, so everyone has this kind of, even if you don't have any interest in data protection, you have this understanding that you have data protection obligations and certain things. So I think that's, while it won't solve everything, I think it will give people at least the mechanism and the rights-based approach to actually address the thing.